All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to another episode of Crypto with English. I'd like to warmly welcome Angie Mathot, crypto artist, vector addict, graphic designer, and she is the brain and muscle power behind Design by Angie. So, for people looking to explore NFTs and the NFT art world, there's many layers and many nuances to this, far beyond, let's say, CryptoPunks and Bored Ape Yacht Club. And there's many artists and many different type of styles to be explored. So Angie uses a type of minimalism with I guess you could say, a vector styled type of art. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not explaining this properly, but vector, I guess you could say vector style art plus minimalism. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a way,
Okay.
yes.
Could you explain some of those concepts for the audience?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I want to say hello to everybody, and of course, thank you for welcoming here in the show. Vector is a kind of drawing that's assisted by computer. The program I personally use is Adobe Illustrator, and I've been using it for over 20 years, which means I know it quite good inside and out.
Yeah.
Vectors is more like an algorithmic definition, like when you draw a curve or whatever, it
Right.
creates an algorithm definition. So it means that you can open it in other vector programs, or you can also use it in EPS files and that kind of thing. The difference between a vector and a normal image, shall I say, is that the
Yeah.
vector is something you can stretch indefinitely without
Hmm.
the loss of quality, because it's a definition, if you want, some kind of algorithm, a
Right.
formula. Yeah.
Wow. And by the way, that's a very very great definition. And something else I want to stress to everybody. So for people who are also getting into NFT art and are kind of dismissing it as simply kind of JPEGs and JPEG like type of art. If you go onto my page and if you go onto Angie's page as well, and by the way, I will be posting up links later today that will direct you to all of her collections that she has posted online, displaying her portfolio of work. This is very, very high quality art. This is something that you would see in some sort of theatrical piece like Blade Runner. Some of the pieces are very, very futuristic. Some of these pieces look like something that would be almost like in an action movie. And
Okay.
some of these pieces also look like they would be in a museum. So it runs the gamut, as they say. But I will tell you this: I would stress anybody to go ahead and check these out. So before I get into like some of the more, I guess, technical questions behind your art
Sure.
style and your, I guess you could say, art philosophy, what
Mhm.
made you get into art to begin with?
I think, as one might say, I was born with a pencil in my hand. For as long as I could remember, I've been doodling, whether it was on the couch, using a felt pen, or
Sure.
just yeah, or just scribbling over paper. It's something that came on really early on, and I found myself doodling and creating for most of my life. And I was so passionate about it that I wanted to study something that had to do with drawing. And that's why I actually turned to graphic design in the first place. It's got that creative flair. It's not just about illustration, but it's also about creating beautiful things, and advising people, bringing things together, creating brands. And the vastness of it, I think, really attracted me.
That's awesome. And yes, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, it's more, then, I studied that, but I never stopped also feeling like an artist myself. Um, I've kept on drawing, and it's kind of like a skill. And when I moved on to graphic design school, we had
Yes.
more drawing classes as well. We really had some advanced sketching, and that really upped my game and pushed me in a way to want to take it further. I mean, when you love drawing and your craft keeps on getting better, you also want to surpass yourself constantly. I was more, to begin with, a drawing artist or somebody who painted. I did a lot of acrylic painting, And the real turn towards NFTs was more during the first lockdowns. I would challenge
Right.
myself, every day to try to put a piece out. And as I had drawn with vectors for a certain amount of time, I really wanted to go further with that. Because the lovely thing is about vectors when you compare to a normal canvas is you can actually control it. And if you don't like
Right.
something, you just pick it up, throw it away and start over. And I think that's amazing because
Yeah.
on a proper canvas, you need to scrap or to cover, wait for it to dry. And so there's
Right.
a lot more complexity. And I think it's really the freedom it gives you. And little by little, people started seeing my art on social media. And I started to get the recommendations that I should seriously consider minting. And that's how I really learned about the blockchain and NFTs.
Right. And were there any particular artists or movies or paintings that, let's say, motivate or inspire, certain pieces or collections?
Yeah, I think you have overall influences, and one of those influence is Malika Favre. She's a French artist, and she also draws using vectors, and it's really minimalistic, but it's realistic at the same time, and it's a really clever of positive and negative space. And if you check her body of work, she really gets to the point and creates something that's easily recognizable. And what I really loved about her work is that it doesn't take a lot of means. The way she is doing this is her color palette is really restrained. So I think there's an influence. I think she's also a graphic designer, if I'm not mistaken. But it's really this influence, You start to learn principles when you're in design school, and it's all about contrasts, whether it be in the colors, in the shapes, things like that. And I think what I really appreciated about her work and also wanted to create in my own style was to find a kind of playfulness, something that was consistent with what I had studied, because I think using contrast is a very powerful way to create and to
Right.
put a message through. And that really got me thinking. And I think she was possibly one of my biggest influence when it really comes to what I do. Now, of course,
Right.
there were plenty of others, but it's more like sometimes you simply see a magnificent picture from a talented photographer, and you're like, oh, the way the light plays. And yeah, the influences are multiple, but I have to say Malika Favre is my biggest one.
I'll have to check that artist out. And to explain a vector a bit more clearly, so it's essentially like a shape
Yeah,
that's on a plane, and you can
right.
either expand it or contract it
Yes.
as you see fit. Essentially,
Mhm.
making different shapes at will. Versus, I guess, as you said, a canvas where you mess up, or if you write something, or if you create something you don't like, it's kind of, what do? You either try to repurpose it or you have to start over, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's more challenging in a way, but vectors are also challenging because yeah, I think it really takes skills to. I'm a person of precision, but I mean really high precision, and it really took me a while to get to the level I wanted to be at. And even I have to say, the last year where instead of just being a graphic designer, I've also become more of an illustrator, which is
Yeah.
what I loved in the first place. So yeah, the way I work also evolved, and I'm really detail oriented, and the level of precision vectors allows you to have is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And going forward from that, when you first started migrating or taking a lot of your talents and taking essentially your pieces, putting them onto some sort of blockchain in the form of an NFT, what, I guess you could say, what token or what type of blockchain platform did you start using? Did you start using Ethereum? Did you try Solana? What was that journey like?
Um, the very first blockchain I ever heard about was Ethereum, because the very first platform where I onboarded is super rare.
Right.
So I got acquainted with that blockchain first, and it was in February about a year ago, so just a little before the NFT rush started. But what made it amazing is just a community, because everybody talks with each other. And thanks to that, I've been able to discover also other blockchains. And I have to say, I had a little fun with Tezos as well. And that was just
Okay, yeah.
awesome because there's a more experimental side to it. Whereas, what
Yes, I
you
heard
will
that.
see
Yeah.
on Ethereum is mostly a collection where you're going to try and stick to something specific, go a certain way with what you create. Whereas Tezos is more like minting fun little experiments. And most of the time, Tezos artworks are a little cheaper, Tezos tokens. And I think that, well, at least in the beginning, I'm not sure now, I should really check, but that was really, really fun because as the community grew and you learned to know more and more people, it also allowed you to have a little piece of everyone.
Yeah.
Then I got contacted to work on the Solana blockchain to create visuals for a project. You probably saw them, the Soul Sisters, the very beautiful 10
Right.
ladies with all
Right.
the fancy attributes. And
Yeah.
that's when I really discovered the Solana. I've not been minting myself personally on there, but you also gain some experience and some knowledge from that you're able to share with everybody else, with the community. So that was quite interesting. And in spite of me not minting on Solana, I do have a Solana wallet and some NFTs on there, of course.
Right.
And the latest blockchain I've really discovered / used is the BNB network. I was
All right.
contacted
Binance Smart Chain. Yeah.
a while ago by somebody working for Orica, and they were wanting to launch a platform that would use a BNB as a payment type.
Good
So
stuff.
yeah.
And I've been hearing a lot more positive things about Binance Smart Chain. And in fact, it seems like Binance Smart Chain is really widely used across the, really across the world, whether it's, this is in Europe or, East Asia or otherwise. So, I'm very much interested in exploring, Binance Smart Chain and kind of a lot of the features and possibilities that it offers as well. So if you could talk a little bit more about the Soul Sisters collection. I looked at it and I looked at the art. It really reminds me of a few things. This looks like this could be in an Avengers movie. This also looks like it could be in a gallery. So, a few thoughts are going through my head. So if you can talk about that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. The Soul Sisters it was already a little while ago. If I remember well, that was around October, November last year. And I'm not the main artist, so I didn't create the layout for the generative art. But their approach was more, they have a whole narrative about the future, saving the planet and doing things for that. I think it's nice when you can really create a good narrative around an NFT collection. And I really liked the fact, they had already gathered some really specific ideas on things they envisioned. And from there, the idea was to create 10 very special ladies that were totally unique, but they were like kind of the goddesses. So they had to be magnificent, kind of be also multicultural at the same time, represent a future for mankind and for women. And so that was quite exciting. And I think it was up to that point back then the nicest project I had worked on. It was, the narrative and the community are amazing. I think community is everything in these kinds of projects.
Absolutely. And I'll post up more information regarding Soul Sisters on my platforms. But if you could talk about the Soul Sisters, so you mentioned like goddesses. What goddesses or historical figures were some of those, I guess you could say, pieces based off of? Like, is it like Greek or Roman mythology, or you could say?
In a way, but I think it went further than that. And I think in the way they wanted to bring this about was for this to reach out to the whole of humanity. Because if you look at humanity, of course, every culture has their myths and legends, but what you will find is that a lot of them, you have common backgrounds and common themes. And if you look at these sisters, you have one representing the moon, and she's really pale, kind of, night-like in a way. You have the sun also, and she's the total opposite, very, very bright with bright colors, and the background also tries like that. I always tried to create an illustration where the background also reflects what the foreground is trying to bring forward. There was also a phoenix soul sister.
Right.
There's also a rainbow one, and she had rainbow hair. It was all fancy. And
Right.
yeah. What else did we have? We had quite a couple of them. One of my favorite ones was the water goddess, and she really has this beautiful wavy hair, with
Right.
lots of the attribute, little shells, that kind of stuff. And I made the background into a gigantic waterfall that fell into the picture.
Wow.
And there's an earth one as well, an earth goddess. I cannot remember every single one of them, but those are the great lines. So it's the nice thing about it. The themes really try to speak to humanity as a whole, and not to push people in a niche. And I think that's the amazing thing about NFTs, is that there's something more global about it. And a lot of the time people really try to how could I say that? To honor. I think that's the word, to really honor other culture and people of color. And I think this is something really, really important. I've heard so many discussions, when I join spaces and things like that, about, people still feeling left out. And I think that's so wrong. And I think if you can create a project that's inclusive and really bring as many people around it, and just like people for who they are, and nothing else, for their qualities, then you're doing big things and you're really moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think ultimately there's more that we have in common than really what is different. So looking at that collection, most societies are built, actually, I would probably say all societies are built around storytelling, at various, periods of time in history and in various ways. So, looking at, let's say, the Solstices collection based on these, you could say, goddesses and mythological figures, whether this is, you could say, a goddess of the sun or the sea or the moon, these specific figures exist in almost every culture,
They do.
throughout history. So if you were to, let's say, look at Europe before Christianity, there were deities for all of these, whether it was the sea, whether it was the moon, whether it was the sun. You go to Africa and East Asia, same thing. Like, so these are almost like collective values and collective beliefs that I think we as humans have. And I think we kind of forget that, as time goes on, and I guess maybe as the world gets more complicated.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, not thinking too far and simply appreciating beauty for what it is. And I think it's also what a lot of NFT art is trying to bring, At least I know that's the feelings I try to convey in my art. There's a therapeutic side to it.
Right.
But the reason I do it is for myself, it kind of brings me peace, and it makes me feel good. And I really want to share that feeling with other people. And if my art is able to move that, and it's not looking for a great interpretation or anything. It tries usually to just be something you can easily come into. And if I can share that feeling, if I can create that sentiment within people, then I think I will have achieved something big. And I think good collections should have a narrative that kind of reaches out to your soul, and to that human feeling you have within you.
Right. And as far as being an artist, do you think often that, when an artist makes a piece of art that really kind of reflects kind of what's going on inside, whether it's values, whether it's some sort of feeling, or, something along those lines?
I can't maybe talk for others for certain, but I do think that art in general really says a lot about the person who creates it. Yes, about their personality.
Right.
I mean, I know of a few people, of course, and some I have met in real life. And I think art, I wouldn't say it defines someone, but it says a lot about them. Yes, that's certain.
Right. And since your art focuses a lot on vectors, the use of vectors and minimalism, so when you're creating a piece, are you often thinking about the future? Because often, like when it comes to, I think, futuristic type art, and I know you and I talked about this. A lot of like that kind of I guess you could say sci-fi or cyberpunk and genres like that, they tend to actually almost have this minimalism type of vector, this rather geometric style of mood and feeling to it. So, and I think part of it is to convey a complexity of emotions, and a lot of times you see like in future type scenarios or future type movies, it tends to kind of almost be like a darker tone. So I kind of wanted to know, what your thoughts were on that.
Well, when I create, I'm very much into the present moment. It's more an inspiration, something that has come and that I need to translate into something for myself. And the reason why my art is minimalist, as you might say, I think it's still again that graphic designer influence, because I think what art school taught me and studying graphic design is that less is more. And I think the best way to achieve something powerful or something sometimes even super complex is to reduce it to its simplest expression. If you get to the core of something, to what it really is, I think you've come a long way. And if you can simplify but still make something recognizable, and that doesn't remove the complexity away from it, it can be quite complex to create something simple, matter of fact.
Right, because and by the way, I absolutely agree with that. Less is more. I think 9 times out of 10, that's a very solid, philosophy to go by. I will say, like, I have seen some stuff out there where it almost just looks a little too busy. There's too much going on, and I will say, as a viewer, I kind of don't know what the hell's going on. And listen, I'm not an expert by any means, but like, let's say if I was to look at your pieces, I do know exactly what's going on. And by the way, it's easy on the eyes. And actually, that's something I kind of like to convey. If something is very easy on the eyes, it's relaxing, and it's also intuitive as well.
That's again the graphic design side talking, because graphic design is all about getting to the point.
Yeah.
It's really about focusing on what the message really is. And when you have too many elements, you need to ask yourself about some of those. Do I really need this in what I'm creating?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then you can possibly simplify and go to the core. And when you create something as a graphic designer, and I think it's one of the most important principles I work a lot with, you usually, when you create a layout, you're really creating a way in which what you're drawing is going to be read, because instinctively the human eye has a way of looking at things. They will usually go towards the big bold titles or the most colorful thing or what pops out the most. And then usually there's kind of a spherical reading that goes on around that according to what other elements have an importance in the visual you are creating. So I use a lot of those principles when I create to, instigate movement or, but yeah, as you say, I take it easy on the eyes, because as a graphic designer, I know the human attention span, when we have so many things competing for our attention on a daily basis, we tend to also fade away quite quickly from things. So the idea here is I get away with something not too busy, where I'm focusing my message, what I want to say. So you can also focus on the art and get to the core of that message. There's not too many frills around it sometimes.
Right.
It is what it is, and that's it.
Yeah. Right. And as far as COVID-19 and lockdowns, and you could say all the problems and issues that have come from that, has that also influenced your art and your style as well? Because I'll talk to artists, NFT artists sometimes, and a lot of times they'll find some sort of inspiration or feeling from a lot of these kind of global events going on, and that really changes the mood and the theme, for a lot of things, especially pieces that they may release. So I was wondering if that's the I guess you could say, if that's the truth, maybe in your part as well.
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm mostly influenced by events of my own personal life because I art is kind of a therapy for me. So of course,
Yeah,
how I'm going to be feeling is going to have an impact on what I will be creating, and it's a way to put things out to create healing, because
yeah,
creating art is really something that brings a lot of inner peace, but also it allows you to heal yourself from things that don't still feel right about you, because of course all of us have problems, we all know that.
sure.
And I don't find myself really influenced by COVID or outside events all that much. My art is usually something really personal, so
Got
I
it.
mean, I haven't experienced that so far.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that perfectly makes sense to say the least. And when going about this, journey, or at least going about art from,
Hmm.
you could say from using, tools like Adobe, taking, art from a graphic designer point of view, has anybody ever tried to dismiss, let's say, or kind of otherwise criticize, the way you're going about art? Because like I said, from other guests that I've had on NFT artists who've had various experiences,
Hmm.
there is almost like a reflex for a lot of people to kind of take a shot at or dismiss or criticize, let's say, NFT art. Like, oh, is that real art? Oh, you're doing this from a computer. Oh, this is not like
Hmm.
classical art. Comments like that.
I think no form of art is superior to another. I think every form of art is very valid in itself. You know what? As long as it makes you tick in a good way inside and brings about your message or your creativity. But I've had to brush comments like that, but sadly enough, not even from the NFT community, but more from people around me at some point.
Right. I think there's this quote that I've seen circulated around. Often your biggest fan is going to be a stranger, and often your biggest critics are going to be people you know. So,
I Yeah, that might
yeah.
be true.
So for 2022, what do you have planned as far as, your NFT art and expanding your collection and, any events that you may be doing?
Right now, I'm working on a new project, which is called the Super Women, which I really recommend that people check out because it's going to be kick ass. We're really working on something good here. The narrative here is more about female are superheroes, in
Right.
spite of them a lot of the time, it's not though centering necessarily about around everyday women. It's really more the superhero side that we're working on here. We're really trying to create our own thing and to make it colorful, something fun. Um, I draw a lot of women. I draw mostly women. So for me, it's always a great pleasure to celebrate them in all kinds of shapes and forms.
Right.
So I'm really trying to do something cool, make it inclusive, be a little fancy, because else it wouldn't be me.
Right. Right. And as far,
Now,
yes,
yeah,
please.
no,
No,
please.
no, after you.
I do not know yet though about the minting date, so hopefully I think it should be within a month or two.
Yeah. As an artist, do you feel that women don't have enough of those type of superhero type characters, whether it's in, movies, whether it's in comic books, whether it's in just, net or even on Netflix, just pop culture generally speaking?
Mm, I think the biggest comment I want to make is not even about pop culture, but about real life.
Hmm.
I think that there are still many bad stereotypes concerning women, which I find very sad because, to tell you the truth, I find myself, uh, as hardworking as any man, and I'm a force to be reckoned with. So I'm not sure that I agree with them. I find them very, very, very sad and quite ignorant, to tell you the truth.
Right.
Even in on the blockchain, if you check what is happening right now, women, I think, are still a fairly small percentage of sales and big artists. I mean, we all know about Pack, we all know about X Copy, we all know about this and
Or
that.
people or, any of
Yeah,
those. Yeah.
but I mean, can you name me one fantastic woman NFT artist right now
Well,
that
I'm speaking.
everybody
Well,
knows?
I'm speaking with one, so hopefully, you'll be one that everybody knows as well. quite
I
soon.
hope. I work hard for that, so let's see. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, please.
no, I think I'm done. But yeah, I think it's the stereotypes with the real world that need to change, in my opinion. And I
Yeah,
think women are not men, it's a fact. But I think, we're equal in our own little ways. And I think the world really needs to change. We're in the 21st century. And what was true maybe 100 years ago no longer is valid. And the world really need to evolve this time.
yeah. So as an artist, like you still, I guess, receive friction or some sort of pushback from other male artists in the community, so to say. I guess my question would be, do you feel that you're otherwise kind of either dismissed or have to go through more obstacles because you are a female artist competing in a space where it is still largely mostly men?
I don't feel personally that I have this problem, but I do hear a lot of female NFT creators complaining about this. And I think the best we can do is really treat each other as equals, avoid passing unnecessary judgment
Right.
and support one another as best as we can. And I think it's what I've tried to do right from the start. I don't want to see myself in competition with anybody or any gender in particular. And I think if we go up, we should all lift each other up and not. So I know that there are still some forms of discriminations and that the market is not the same for both male and female. But even though I'm aware of that, I don't make it center stage of my life. I still try to do things. Of course, I will support other women perhaps a little more because I know it's a tough world and
Yeah.
it's not always easy for us. So I might more easily support women because st- a lot of us still struggle to gain visibility. And of course, the NFT space is so crowded that it's not always that easy
Right.
to really gain visibility. So, but I won't support the other gender or other genders any less because of that. Because of
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Do you feel that, I guess you could say, female superhero like figures have, I, I, I don't know what the true term is, but it seems like maybe more of those type of either real life or you could even say mythical or, figures from like either movies or television or comics. Do you think that there's almost less of that being promoted or made visible now? Because I have an example for you. So when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and not to say I'm ancient, I'm 37, but when I was a kid, I automatically knew of a bunch of, you could say, female superhero type figures just from entertainment alone. So if
Mhm.
you looked at like Sarah Connor from the Terminator, you look at
Yeah.
Ellen Ripley, from Aliens. You look at I think the original Wonder Woman series that was from the
Mhm.
70s to like the early 80s with Linda Carter. Like, if I was, a kid, like I can name those, figures off the top of my head. And then, Spider-Man started becoming more and more
Yeah.
popular as well in X-Men. So you essentially had like the female X-Men characters. You had like a Storm, you had Rogue, you had Jean Grey, and
Mhm.
their powers were on par with the rest of their, I guess you could say, the rest of their male cohorts, so to say.
Mhm.
Now, it seems like as time goes on, and I don't know if this is purely just that there's too much information out there or social media is just bombarding people's awareness all the time,
Mhm.
but it doesn't seem like there's as many characters to point to in many ways nowadays as it was back then, so to say. And it seems like a lot of times when characters are kind of made, they don't have that same like kind of effect. And I know I'm comparing something now from when I was a kid, but I would say like, as a kid, people
Yeah.
knew who those female superheroes were, and they were taken very, very seriously. They were considered very, very cool. You looked at the Terminator movies, you looked at Aliens, like,
Mhm.
these are something, these are movies and experiences guys would equally enjoy. I don't know if you remember the one movie called Red Sonja back in the 80s, but this was
No, I don't think I did.
it was a spin-off of Conan the Barbarian with
Okay.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was starring this very famous Danish actress. I forgot her name, but she was the female version of Conan the Barbarian, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was actually in that movie as well. And this was actually part of like a real comic book from back in the day as well. But that movie was also mildly popular as well. So, like I'm saying, as a kid, there was a lot of concrete examples to point to, and they were taken very, very seriously as, icons. I feel like nowadays, despite, let's say, more information and more access to entertainment and more access to just everything, I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't seem like those icons are just having the same effect. So I know that's kind of a loaded question, but I kind of wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, what you say is quite interesting, and I think to really be sincere, I don't think it has to do with art in itself, but I think when you think Hollywood, when you think about movies and series, etc.,
Yeah.
I think we've really come around in a way where it's kind of difficult not to write about something that's not been written about to begin with. So
Right.
in a way, you're just changing the concept a little, tweaking it and then branding it something new. You see a lot of that happening. But
Yeah.
I think it's also I would say greed, because they see that a franchise is going to do well, so they're going to try, and pop in
Right.
your face as many movies as they can. Pirates of the Caribbean 1, 2, 3,
Sure.
4. I don't know where it stops anymore. And I think there comes a point where when you do too much of that, what you create in effect is a caricature of a caricature. So
Right.
if you do it for a while, you're caricaturing yourself so bad that in a way you lose the essence of something.
Right. No, you know what? And I think you raise an excellent point. I think that is in many ways exactly what it is. So, for instance, when I looked at one of your figures and it was essentially of like a female Rambo, that automatically makes sense. And also I love all the Rambo movies as well. And, the thing is, like I said, as a kid, there were, the female equivalents of that. Like, I remember growing up, there was this TV series called Xena Warrior Princess.
Yeah,
It was
I
with this
remember
actress, Lucy Lawless. That was as popular, if not more popular, than Hercules, which starred
Yeah.
Kevin Sorbo at the time. And by the way, like, men and women alike watched, Xena Warrior Princess. They made video games out of this. They made like side movies out of this. They made, so many things. And, kind of to your point, maybe it's because the way entertainment is kind of built, those icons just don't seem to have that same effect. Where me, thinking as a kid, like I could think of many, many examples from then of, let's say, these female superhero type characters, these female superhero characters. And then like nowadays, it's I don't know what it is, but it seems like more and more of the same kind of recycled, formulaic, kind of things. And I think a lot of times, in many ways, entertainment is a reflection. Entertainment and art is to an extent a reflection of maybe, or a critique, yeah, of of where we are, and even in historical senses as well. You have characters, you have real life figures like Joan of Arc, during the 100 Years' War between England and France, and essentially, the English were defeated, at the end of that war. So the fact of the matter is, she was a woman. She was barely in her early 20s, was commanding an army, and became essentially a canonized saint, after she had passed away. So there are many figures like that, that exist in history, but it kind of just seems like people kind of maybe had more of a sense of this, when I was a kid than now. So it's very strange, despite that we're here in 2022, but it seems like at times we're taking a few steps back as a human race.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah, it's really like, just like that. And like I said, as far as female characters or in figures and superheroes in real life history, you had Boudica, who was essentially I speculate she's probably what Xena Warrior Princess and other characters based off. She was the Celtic queen of the Britons when the Romans occupied. She fought almost completely naked, and she actually led the armies to essentially defeat and kill the Romans in England, so to say. And so just to kind of like name some examples from that, there's a lot of concrete evidence of female superhero, you could almost say deity level characters throughout history. But the irony is, it seems like even with more and more information that we have nowadays, it doesn't seem like it reflects I guess you could say, progress, or you could say wisdom of everything kind of accumulated to this point.
More doesn't mean more qualitative. It just means more overall, which means more rubbish, more good, more bad.
I think that goes back to minimalism. I think we've got full circle. Yeah. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah. I think it's a lot more complex. And I think, I think there were maybe times when women are more fashionable and sometimes a little less. But it's like you say, sometimes we make leaps forward and sometimes we make leaps backwards. And I think it also depends who does the politic and what the ideas are. Because, I try to, of course, follow what happens on a global scale. And, a lot of women fought to have some very basic rights, even over their own bodies. Yeah. And it's really surprising to see, that in some places in the United States and in other countries here, even close by in Europe, we've regressed, regarding the rights we gave to women. I mean, some of those were taken away. Like, we're not even, masters of our own bodies or good enough to even think some of our decisions.
Right.
And I find it really sad.
Right. And by the way, I agree. And I guess that kind of goes to the point where it seems like we're taking one step forward and two steps back. And it kind of shows obviously it shows probably in entertainment, it shows in politics, and probably even shows in art with certain artists as well, and kind of like, what you said, regarding, women and human rights and, kind of the fight for rights. It is astonishing that some of these problems still exist. And especially if you look at the year that we're in right now, this is 2022, this is the future as far as most people are concerned. And these are still issues that have existed for a long time. And unfortunately, there's still issues that are being litigated against. These are issues that people are trying to essentially change the laws on, kind of move the clock backwards. So it's very, very confusing, I'll have to say.
Yeah, but women not even able to have their own bank account was barely 70 years ago when you think about it.
Right. And, there was a time in the United States, and this was kind of pre-World War II, and maybe even a little around it, though. But like, young women, they couldn't leave the house at night without like a male companion, or so to say, to, go out and, let's say, I don't know, buy necessities or just go out to just do anything. Like, there was like kind of these stigmas and kind of these, you could say, these obstacles, and these were not very long ago at all.
No. Yeah. I mean, when you really think of the modern way of living now, where a woman is kind of working almost in most places now for the same salary as a man. I mean, this isn't from so long ago. I think it really began, I think around the 70s, 80s, you started to see more women in the workplace. And, things slowly went a little uphill. But, it's crazy, when you think about it.
Right. And, it probably was the 70s or 80s when, you had more and more women entering the same workforce as men. And, these problems, they haven't really gone away, to say the least. And even though I think the United States gets a lot of attention for this, But I've also seen examples of this in Europe as well. And I've seen leaders, let's say, over in Europe in different countries, almost you could say use the same script or use the same lines as some of the more fringe ones over here as well, I have to say.
Yeah, I think I think the world still needs to change to grow, and all we can do, I think, is do our best, be the
Yeah,
best we can, also as respectful as possible. I think
right,
when you really try to be as respectful as possible and that your freedom stop where that of somebody else's begin,
right.
it's, you can really have good intuitions, on where the fringe moments, where the fringe part is. And I
Yeah,
think we should really learn to draw the line, but I'm confident we will grow as the human race to improve ourselves and to
yeah,
accept people the way they are. Because they are not,
yeah,
of course, just women. They are people who are trans and other things like that. And I think no matter what gender or what people's orientations are, we have to learn to respect that. And it's none of our business, to be able to judge
sure.
somebody and to make comments on this or that. And I'm still hearing such cringe things, on a daily basis. A
Right,
lot of the time while I work, I do watch a lot of YouTube, mostly for the comments, for the
right.
audio,
Yeah,
because I'm not really looking. But yeah, I still listen to things. And yeah, the cringe stuff still happens on a fairly regular basis. And in a way, you're like, WTF, we're in
yeah,
2022, like you said before. And how is this still a thing? How can this still be possible? And even
yeah.
people getting away with it, I think, is the worst.
Yeah, and like I said, I almost feel like kids during my generation almost had a broader awareness of, let's say, equality, and you could say the idea and the concept and the existence of, let's say, on par female superheroes, whether real or fictional. And I feel like now it's like, it's kind of I don't know if it's going down. I don't know if it's just peaks and valleys, but there is a sense of things going a little bit backwards instead of forward. So I looked at your art and some of your collections. Of course I liked focusing on what we discussed today. So the superheroes and the Soul Sisters. So I have a question for you. Do you think that this type of art that you've made between these two, Soul Sisters and the superheroes, is this your desire? Do you feel like deep down inside, is this your desire to put a superhero like that out there? Because there aren't so many. Is this your desire to, let's say, create a superhero story for women in 2022 and beyond?
I think it might come as a shock, but it's my honest point of view. Um, I like the superhero ideas, and I think women, in a way, are superheroes, but I
Yeah,
don't want to necessarily push a certain narrative out. I think
right.
when you really like something and it calls to you, to your soul, in a way, you make the narrative your own.
Yeah,
So, what I'm focusing on is to make beautiful art that celebrates femininity, life,
right.
of beauty. It's really what my idea is about. And if in the process I can spin something, or create a narrative for people where they can find themselves and they can find inspiration in that, then I think as an artist, I've achieved something.
Yeah, and by the way, to add to that, I looked at this. I find it very, very sincere. And what I mean is that you look at I guess you could say, the figures you've created. They're
Mhm.
very feminine, very beautiful. But
Thank
you
you.
could also tell, yes, but you could also tell they have special abilities. There is something special, some sort of hidden power or obvious, power behind it. So I look at this as, from the point of view, this is pretty cool. This is a sincere, I guess you could say, character or concept here. I don't feel like I'm being preached to. And I feel like this is something that I could see being celebrated in culture, so to say, whether it's like the Joan of Arc, whether it's like Boudica, whether it's like a Wonder Woman, it comes off very, very sincere, and I would say balanced, so to say. It's not too much one way or the other. You kind of have two very, very good ingredients, there, because, I think this in many ways reminds people of those type of historical or otherwise figurative, type characters.
Have you seen my the Women of Power collection I've started creating on OpenSea? Because I've actually got a Boudica on there. I've got a Cleopatra.
I saw the Cleopatra one. Yes, I didn't see the Boudica one. I may have overlooked that one, but I'll check that out.
I even made one of the Queen of Sheba. I really tried to pick out a few very strong women in what they did in history, even sometimes some of the most cruel ones, because of course there have been really cruel women. And I'm thinking, for example, about Catherine de Medici that I also created in that collection. But yeah, see, she's a historical figure, and that specific collection is really inspired by history and to some extent tradition, like stories, but mostly they're based off real people. And we also need to celebrate the bad women. There were bad women in history. But they shaped history. And even if Catherine de Medici was such a terrible woman, because she was terrible, let's be honest, she was very cruel, she shaped history. And even if it's not per se in a good way directly, we're here today. The world is the way it is in a way because of women who had balls at a point, where it was not expected from them. And a lot of the time they really had to fight for this recognition or for this equality or simply to have their place in society.
Yeah, and by the way, I think that's a great point you raised. So even kind of celebrating or recognizing the bad ones, that gives people perspective, and that also kind of gives people a metric, some sort of comparison to. And listen, it also makes for a very, very interesting form of art and conversation. Speaking of, let's say, the bad figures or the malevolent figures, I was reading, there was this one, I guess you could say, noblewoman. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory. I think that's her name. She was a princess of Hungary. She was actually one of the first recorded serial killers in history.
Oh, I think I've heard about that. Yes.
Right. So she lived in, right? Yeah.
That's the one.
From Hungary. So, lived in a huge palace, and then, servants, cooks, even guards were going missing, and she was actually killing them and, dismembering and, kind of the traditional things you think of as far as, serial killers. But believe it or not, she was one of the first recorded, I guess you could say, perpetrators of what is serial killing, so to say.
I think you can call her a psychopath at that point.
Yeah. And there's an equivalent example in ancient Chinese history as well. So I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it was essentially a noblewoman, a princess, who was also doing the same thing as well. So, literally using, servants and staff and guards and, killing, dismembering, all of those things as well. So it's very, very interesting, to say the least. It's very, it provides for a good and interesting dialogue, but it also, makes people a little bit smarter. These are a lot of things that have happened in history, and these are things to either draw inspiration from, positively or negatively, and you could put that in art or elsewhere.
Definitely. And I'm actually, the reason why I created that specific collection in the first place is because I'm a history lover. I just love historical books, I studied graphic design, but at some point I really had a strong hesitation between stopping graphic design and actually, combining art and history to study.
And I noticed that's what you did with your collection. So I look at it and I'm like, wow, this is very, very cool, to say the least.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think if you can combine many of the things you like the most, then you're creating something unique. And of course, putting in all that emotion and all that passion you have, I think you can really come up with amazing things.
Yeah. And I was going to say, for your collection, if you wanted to focus on some of the villains of history, I think Elizabeth Bathory might be a good source of inspiration for a piece, because there's a lot of literature
That
on,
is true.
on her bio and like the things that happened, during that time. And by the way, this was a figure that everybody, I think with at least within those royal circles knew.
Mhm.
So, let me tell you this. This woman easily intimidated soldiers and men alike in that time, as well. So just to give you an example, had the same gravitas and
Mhm.
ability to intimidate like any other man, maybe if not more,
Yeah.
given the reputation, so to say.
I think as a woman, people often, again,
Yeah.
the stereotypes coming to play,
Yeah.
and you're often you have people try to fit you into mold and these stereotypes, like you need to be small, gorgeous, kind, bloody, blah, blah. But it's not true. We can have
Yeah.
just as a badass personality as a man would, and
Yeah, there's plenty of history to
yeah, I
show
mean,
that too. Yeah.
you're talking here about this Hungarian princess, but even Cleopatra. Why did
Oh
she
yeah, she did a lot of.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
went out with Julius Caesar and then with Mark Antony. But why did two successive powerful men turn to her? They literally ate in her hand. She was not
Right. She
necessarily
kind
the
of held
type.
them by, kind of had them on, kind of
Yeah,
controlled them on a string, essentially, like
yeah.
marionettes or something. Yeah.
In a way, yeah. But I think she possibly, at some point really was genuinely in love with them. But it's the way she harnessed that power, I think, that drew these men to her.
Right.
And that's,
And
I
there,
think, the way how you write history, by making
absolutely,
things happen. And
absolutely. And even if you talk about the mythology of the Amazonians, which,
Mhm.
obviously, Wonder Woman is based off of, and probably like, characters like Xena Warrior Princess,
Yeah,
there is a historical context and record
there
of
is.
some of that. So if you look at, the area between, I think, Greece and Persia, during,
Yes.
during like 2000, plus years ago, there were essentially bands of women, and I think it may have been speculated they were mercenaries, essentially, had their own community, wore, armor. I guess you could say they wore the breastplates. They wore essentially like the tip of traditional Greek helmets, and had the spears and the hoplite spears, and essentially fought and survived like any other male soldier or mercenary would, back in those days as well. So a lot of these ideas don't come from nowhere, so to say.
In
Yeah.
French, which is my mother tongue, we have a saying that goes along the lines of "You do not have smoke without fire."
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, we say that here too. And there's so many great examples to draw on. And knowing that you're also a huge student and fan of history, I'm very, very excited to see, what you'll be producing this year. And by the way, if I can be of any service to offer any ideas as far as some of your historical, based collections, I'd be more than happy to. Other than, I guess you could say, live streaming and podcasting, I have an incredible collection and library of his books. I go through books like crazy. So I'm sure I can think of a
I know the
few
feeling.
ideas.
But please, I mean, be my guest because I still need to complete my Super Women collection. As far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned, I've only drawn. Sorry.
You know what I'm thinking? Halloween, Elizabeth Bathory. I think something good could be could be done around that time.
I think you got something really good there going because I only
Oh yeah.
created, I think, 13 women out of 20 I'm supposed to create for that specific collection. So, but the thing is, I really want to also include people from far away in history, like
Right.
antiquity, as
Yeah.
much as people from modern time, but also the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. I'm
Yeah.
trying to be as broad as possible. So,
Which is
any
awesome.
yeah, any good idea I think you have on that, please shoot it. And
Right.
usually when I mint the token, I always do a little research, to tell a couple of words in the description of the NFTs, so people know, this is who I am buying and this was her story, just in a few lines. Because I think
Right.
it's always nice to give the background information on what you are seeing in the visual, because a lot of the time, of course, things are linked. So
Right. Well, even just to offer a few more ideas before we end the show. So, in, I guess you could say, the time of the Dark Ages in Vikings,
Mhm.
there's the concept of the sword maiden, the Valkyrie, essentially like this female spirit that
So,
helps
yeah.
out like Viking warriors in battle and even in the afterlife. Well,
Mhm.
there's evidence that strongly shows, and it I would say it almost certainly happened, but women also participated in warfare the same as their male Viking counterparts. So, for practical purposes, there were female Vikings with the
Mhm.
helmets, with the shields, with the axes. You also see this in Native American cultures as well. And believe it or not, you see this in a more ancient time in Japan.
Yeah, I think
So,
it's not just Japan, I think it's
right.
all over the place because
Yeah.
I think in a very distant past, we used to be in a matriarchal society, which is quite different, of course, from what we're experiencing now. But if when scientists and archaeologists start really looking into even things from the prehistory, what we're
Yeah.
finding out tends to actually say that women were a very, very active part of the community, and they were not just
Yeah.
staying home raising the children. So, I mean, those are really preconceived ideas somebody created at some given point.
Right. Yeah. And, just to kind of give you an example. So, in martial arts and in, I guess you could say, East Asian, you
Hmm.
know, you could say military history, there's a weapon. It's called naginata. So, it's essentially a spear. And instead of just having a regular point, it's a sword head on top of it.
Okay.
So, in Japan, women used that weapon, and that weapon became synonymous with women warriors. So, whereas men, or you could say male samurai, they typically just
Mhm.
used either the sword
Yeah.
or they used a spear or a bow, the
Hmm.
women used essentially the naginata, which was essentially the sword head that was on top of a very, very long spear. And in fact, even till this day, there is a martial arts discipline in school that is predominantly female that is actually the study of that as well. So,
Okay.
I think history is rich with many of these examples, to say the
Oh
least. So,
yeah.
like I said, I could probably talk about this stuff forever, but I'd be more than happy to offer any ideas, down the line.
And it's greatly appreciated because yeah, I mean, sometimes you're biased because yeah, you're working on different projects and
Right.
yeah, and I think it's nice sometimes to also have a little influence from the outside because in a way it kind of gets you out of your comfort zone. So I'd be curious to hear what
Oh,
you
even more so, like if you're even thinking of U.S. audiences, if you think of the concept of the cowboy, you think of like old Clint Eastwood and John Wayne movies. There were female cowboys in
Mhm.
recorded history. Here in the United States, there's a famous song I think called "Janie Get Your Gun." It was actually based off of a female, you could say, cow woman, so to
Okay.
say. She was a gunslinger, had the hat, had the two pistols. Not kidding about this. So there's
Oh,
many, many, yeah, there's many examples of this
I think
that
I'd love to
exist.
have some of that in my art.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll send you some links, some historical, I guess you could say, sources to maybe, get some
Hmm.
inspiration from. But listen, everybody, I would strongly suggest checking out Angie Mathot's collection. I think we do need some kind of superhero renaissance of art, and I will say Angie is the primary source for this. So I will be sure to post her links in my LinkedIn and Twitter later today. So Angie, it was an absolute pleasure, coming on today and discussing your art and
Likewise.
discussing, some of your beliefs and philosophies and direction of this. So I am very excited to see, where this is going. And I'm very excited to see what female figures you'll be adding to your superhero collection, whether they're heroes or villains. I'm equally fascinated to see what's going to be coming up later this year.
Yeah, drum roll, because I never really plan in advance, so it comes when it comes, and what
Right.
drops gets dropped. So yeah, but
Sounds good.
yeah, I'm not planning too much. Usually, it's kind of spontaneous. It's more like, oh, I feel like I'm inspired by this personality, and okay, I just want to create a tribute to her in a kind of way.
Right. Awesome. Angie, it was an absolute pleasure having you on today. I'm very much looking
Likewise.
forward to seeing what you have in store for all of us for this year in 2022.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure being here and sharing some time with you. It really felt more like a discussion than an interview. And if it
Right.
wasn't for my webcam turned on, I think I would have been a little less nervous.
Well, listen, I'm glad you had a good and relaxing and engaging time here. And listen, life is too short, so try to make everything you do with a little bit of fun. That's what I feel anyway.
Yeah, you're completely right. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
I wish all our watchers, listeners, of course, a magnificent day, night, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Yes,
Good morning.
absolutely. Sounds good. And thank you, and take care.
You too. Take good care.
And I'll talk to you soon.